We walked down the little roads in Cumberland and stooped because the sky hung down so low. And no place that we went was far. The earth and the sky hung close and near. And the old hunger returned, the obscure and terrible hunger that haunts and hurts Americans, makes us exiles in our own land, strangers wherever we go. Oh, I will go up and down the country and back and forth across the country. I will go out west for the States or Square. I will go to Boise and Helena, Albuquerque, the two Dakotas, all the unknown places. Say, brother, have you heard the thunder of the fast express? Have you seen starlight on the rails?
There's got to be a better way. This is a line I'm sure you've heard many times, perhaps more derisively than in sincerity, parodying the Rube Goldberg-esque solutions looking for problems often seen in infomercials, but it's a phrase that often rings true nonetheless. I was standing in my parents' kitchen at the end of the Twin Cities Metro about 5 years ago, having a midnight snack and pondering the preceding gap year. I was thinking about my return to college, the drive back to Rapid City, how much it sucked, when my mind began to wander. Being the foamer that I am, I began dreaming about how much easier it would be to be carried along in excess of 120 miles an hour, shortening my trip time by a third and giving me more than enough legroom so that my toes don't go numb. I'm 6'2" and drove a '98 Saturn wagon at the time, so that was a legitimate problem. Sure, it might not work for the move out or back, but for going home for the holidays or visiting family near the South Dakota-Minnesota border, it'd be great. But why stop there? Certainly there's other communities in the upper Midwest that deserve rail service. What makes Rapid City so special to get rail service first? Well, other than tourism and personal connections, which I no longer really have since graduating, there really isn't any. So let's add those places too, throw in some commuter lines and light rail for good measure, and baby, you got stew going. The question stopped being, how can I make sure I don't get a deep vein thrombosis, and change to, wait, why does the 16th largest metro in the United States, home to more people than the state of Connecticut, have just one measly intercity train a day, and is usually late to boot? And so the end goal also changed. To bring the Twin Cities rail network to a comparable level as quote-unquote transit-heavy cities such as Chicago, Boston, New York, and so on, relative to its size, of course. What I ended up with, and I hesitate to say it's 100% done, is a system of 8 new or modified long-distance routes, 7 new state-supported routes consisting of 38 round trips, 130 miles of light rail, and 457 miles of commuter rail. Well, regional rail. We'll get to that. These routes spread across 20 states and are anchored on either Target Field Station in Minneapolis or St. Paul Union Depot. Most of these routes come from state or local proposals, with a couple of my own creation thrown in for flavoring. And now comes the tall task of selling this plan to the general public. I'm certainly not the first asshole who thinks they have the best idea how trains should be run. Hell, there's enough groups in Minnesota alone where it's hard to come up with an original name for this. But, as all assholes do, I have reasons to believe my plan is the best and that now is the time to implement it. Not just for the usual reasons of combating climate change, fighting traffic, improving the economy, better city design, and just a general love of trains, but for a few other specific reasons as well. The first is the boatload of cash Amtrak set to get in the coming years, going towards service improvements and new equipment. Piggybacking off the long-distance fleet and P-42 replacement orders will drive down costs per units, resulting in savings for all parties. The second is the recent STB hearings regarding Gulf Coast Rail. Although I'd like to have seen the process to completion for the sake of precedent, haggling down from several $billion to only about $200 million is still quite the feat, and will hopefully force more cooperation from freight railroads. Then there's the 2022 elections, resulting in a DFL trifecta in Minnesota state government, who have since fully funded the Northern Lights Express and have started the groundwork on future improvements. Finally, there's several relevant lines that are currently undergoing major rehabilitation, mostly in South Dakota where this all started. These lines have long languished with little to no online industries and bad track, but are now receiving fresh investments from new owners. Why not go all out and make them premier passenger lines as well? I'm aware some of these places haven't seen passenger rail in a number of decades. Many of them are opposed to expanding passenger rail, even right here in Minnesota. But some of these services haven't been gone as long as it may seem. My grandpa remembers taking the train from Windham up to the Twin Cities or down to Omaha to negotiate grain prices, and my dad used to take the North Star, that's 2 words as in the Amtrak train, up to Duluth to go skiing. Hell, my uncle even used to use the old streetcar network to go to violin lessons when he was a kid. As the entire media industry has discovered at this point, nostalgia is a powerful tool, and tapping into it is one of the keys to moving these plans forward, so it's a good idea to use it while the people who remembers these trains are still alive. Not to mention, there's some political chicanery that can be used to bypass hostile governing bodies, like how Mobile is funding Alabama's contribution to Gulf Coast service. Finally, people's attitudes change when there's free stuff involved, or at least a heavy discount by way of government grants. Over the coming months, or maybe years, I hope to explain each of these routes in detail, from the history of the previous services, to why each one of them is necessary to ridership, and possibly cost estimates. Thankfully, for most of these routes, a lot of the legwork is already done for me, with studies in various states' rail plans as well as other regional rail authorities and Amtrak themselves. To fill in the gaps, I'll be using a tool that transit YouTubers love to use, a video game. In this case, NIMBY Rails. The cost and ridership don't seem all that accurate, but it should at least make a good visual aid. I'll start with the long-distance trains and move to the state-supported services and finally the commuter rail and light rail. Probably doing 1 route per video, maybe more for the latter. To start, I've already gone through the effort of recreating Amtrak's western routes as well as Metro Transit's rail network as a baseline reference. LRT frequency is just set to every 10-ish minutes, while all other timetables are recreated to a reasonable degree of accuracy. Also, there's no way to do tri-weekly service, so the Sunset now runs daily, I guess. Whatever, we'll just call it part of my plan. Consequently, the Texas Eagle now terminates at San Antonio. Let's just go ahead and add the Northern Lights Express and Great River too, since those are essentially done. If you want to get ahead of the curve, I do occasionally write for streets.mn and post stuff related to that on my Blue Sky. If this is the first time seeing my channel, I also post general foamery as well as model railroading videos, so give them a look. And be sure to join me next time when I talk about the first long-distance train, the city of Winnipeg.
That's it! Back to Winnipeg!